Today we have one of the most interesting forms of discernment that you can find, and this is the famous story of Gamaliel. So what's happening is that you've got this Christian sect that is starting to happen. And notice something that I said yesterday. In none of these scenes are the Sanhedrin and everything engaged in prayer. What is your will, Lord? Let us do it. This is so important. In none of these scenes are they engaged in prayer. Prayer is so important. So one of the things we're seeing there is that you have Gamaliel, and he stands up and he says, look, here, let's look at it this way. This movement has started. And the sign that this movement is real or fake depends on how long it lasts. Because if this is just a fake movement, and in fact, this Jesus isn't who he said he was, and these apostles have all faked this whole thing, it's going to collapse. It's not going to last. But if it lasts, and that's a sign that it could be the work of God, and if it is the work of God, nothing is going to stop it. You see that? That's important. These are important things. And they are key to what we actually believe. Now, as Catholics, we've been around for 2,000 years, and we can look at some of the other Christian faiths and saying, well, they have lasted, and that's a good point, and we can talk about that in a second, which we will, unless I forget, but we do that from time to time. But in any case, you recognize that we've been around for 2,000 years. What is the Catholic Church's belief on our teaching? We're founded by Christ. I guess someone said even Alexa will tell you that. We're founded by Christ, and we've been around for 2,000 years. So it is our belief that we hold the fullness of truth. We're still understanding it. We're still deepening our understanding. That comes from the idea of development of doctrine from John Henry Newman. But we're developing this. I mean, we're seeking to know the profound levels of this truth, but we are, our church has the fullness of truth. Every other spiritual endeavor has some truth. We believe that we have the fullness of truth. Well, okay, we understand that, and that's part of the discernment. But it also means that we want to understand what the Lord is saying to us through this and other realities. And Gamaliel is making this very clear. If this is not of God, it's going to collapse. And it's of God. Now, let me give you an example. I talk about in different circles, and that is, name me a group that, a culture that doesn't exist anymore, and there are plenty of them. They just don't exist anymore. You may find small pockets of this culture because that's not ultimately what was the call of humanity through these various cultures. Well, same with our faith. The Jews are still around. All the communities surrounding the Jews, the territory is there, but the cultures are not. There are no Canaanites. There are no, let me think some of the others. There are no Philistines. None of these groups still exist. There are no Amalekites. Those cultures are gone. But the Jewish culture stayed because it was or is a work of God. Well, our Christian faith is the same. It's a work of God, and we watch this happen, and we see that the Lord is working through us. But why? One of the things that kind of bothers me is when people have this triumphalist attitude. Where the true church? Where this? Where that? Blah, 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 blah. It's like we won a game. But the fact is, we are called to a mission, and our mission is to be witnesses to the kingdom of God. That's our mission. And we were called to do that. When you were baptized, you were called to be part of that mission. It's not just belief in God, and it's not just earning your way into heaven. You were called to a mission, and that mission is right at the very base of that mission, the very foundation of that mission, is what we see Gamaliel talking about, where he is saying, look, if this is of God, you're not going to stop it. It's going to go on and on and on. But if it isn't from God, it's going to collapse. And then he starts naming all these other groups that collapsed. So we recognize you and I have this mission, and that's what he's talking about. We trust in that mission. We believe in that mission. And notice there's another part of this. There's also Christianity, which is not just Catholicism. Remember, all Catholics are Christians, not all Christians are Catholics. But we also believe that the other Christian faiths have truth as well. We believe we have the fullness of truth, so they don't have sacraments generally. Some of them do. They don't have some of the teachings we'd have. They don't have the sacrament of confession and may not believe in it. But they do have a desire to serve the Lord. They have this vision to serve the Lord, a vision that I wish many of us in the Catholic Church had, that excitement of serving the Lord. There's a thing in the evangelical community called church planting, where they go somewhere and they start a church. It's called church planting. And they're all excited about convert and bringing people to the faith. Of course, unfortunately, they usually bring Catholics. That's usually their target. So that's something I'm not too crazy about. But they have that vision, that excitement, that whole thing. And I remember in the seminary, they warned us of having an idea of maintenance. We want vision. We want to be servants of Christ with vision. And you can see that. That's one of our calls, to bring the message of the gospel. And one of the things we can do is we can get sidelined in different ideas, and that's not of God either. You want to be focused on living the gospel. You can see one of the things that I focus, and you're going to talk about it in the second, or I'm going to talk about it. You're not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it in the second half of the program, which is about the importance of prayer. I have real issues, and you'll hear that in the second half of the program. I have real issues with people who sum up our faith as a moral code. It's not. Please stop saying that. Anyone who gets there every Sunday and is preaching moral code, that's moral code comes from seeking to love God and love neighbor, and you will live your moral code. And when you don't live your moral code, what God is calling us to, you will realize that you have sinned and you want to go to confession. If everything is rooted in sin and confession, I have to go to confession so I can receive communion, or I have to go to confession so I'm not hit by a bus. If I'm hit by a bus, I'll go to heaven. No, it's got to be that relationship, and that really is the core of our faith. Notice that. But it goes back to understanding everything about our faith, which takes a lot of time. If you look at the saints understood this, and they lived with this powerful relationship with God. This really, what was it? St. Teresa of Avila called him His Majesty. She didn't look at me, oh, this is God and I have to do the right thing all the time. No, His Majesty. And she fell in love with God. And these are all elements of this movement that keeps it going. Probably one of the things that would have collapsed the movement, according to Gamaliel, I mean, he doesn't say this, but it's pretty obvious, is if there was any kind of self-interest in it, like on a financial level. Hey, if we do this, we can make lots of money. That was no way the apostles' thoughts. No way did they, because they lost, they really suffered. And that's part of it. Those movements that aren't true to their mission collapse. And this is all of which Gamaliel is implying with this whole thing. He says, you could be fighting God here. Do you understand? You're all saying this is a problem and this is this, that. You could be fighting God here, and you don't want to be doing that, because that will be a disaster. So just let it go. Leave it alone. Let it just continue, because what's going to happen is, if it's of God, you're not going to stop it. And if it isn't of God, it's going to collapse on its own. So that's a major act of discernment. Now, can we say that some of the other Christian faiths are also inspired by the Holy Spirit? I believe yes. And maybe as a way, as I just described to you, as a way to be a counter to us to say, do you see how excited they are about the faith? You need to be as excited. Do you see how they're church planting? You need to be excited. And all that. You need to really be filled with the Spirit. Reminds me, we meet friends who are clergy from other faiths, and there was a pastor who came in to where my parish was from the Congregationalist Church, and he was Puerto Rican and offered Puerto Rican food at a buffet, and he advertised this all over the area. And I'm like, you don't have to ask me twice. And I told him, I says, I love Puerto Rican food. Come on. We had a great relationship. We both believed. We believed different things, but we both believed. But we believe as Catholics that the fullness of truth is in the Catholic Church. In either case, the movement never ended. The Christian movement continues to this day. Gamaliel was right, and it's a form of discernment. Trust that the Lord is working here, and trust that he's leading you to wherever he's calling you to do in your faith, because it is a mission. We're going to be right back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. So one of the things I wanted to discuss, it's one of my elements that I think and teach on a lot, is the importance of prayer. And it just so happens this coming weekend is one of my favorite Bible verses. We've talked about it before, Bible passages, I guess you could say, or Bible stories is maybe a better word. And that is the disciples on the way to Emmaus. That's coming up on Sunday, or for those of you who go to Mass on Saturday afternoon, on Saturdays. So the story is that you have the 2 disciples who are walking to Emmaus. And by the way, they're not one of the apostles. They're other disciples. One of them is named Cleopas. And all of a sudden, the stranger comes up, and you learn in the passage that this is Jesus, but they don't recognize him. And we talked about this earlier, where I said this explains to us the importance of the reading the Old Testament scriptures, because they're all confused and that Jesus died, and then they're hearing rumors that he rose from the dead, and they're trying to understand this. And what happens is Jesus explains to him all the passages in the Old Testament that apply to him. Now, we've talked about that, but let me talk about another element in this. Jesus working with them, speaking to them. And, of course, them speaking to Jesus. As a matter of fact, they're the ones that basically bring it up to him. This is so important. One of the real problems in our church, it's a real problem. It's something that I am absolutely against, although I'm about like the only person that, there are plenty of us like this. Mostly, by the way, having a spirituality from another country, which mine comes from Latin America. But this concept and understanding and the reality of faith that prayer has got to be central to everything we are about. That's important, to bring everything to prayer. And the reason why I bring that up is when I grew up, the concept of prayer was, which is one of my complaints against the Baltimore Catechism, because that's clearly written in the Baltimore Catechism, not these words, but the whole setup. It's a very small chapter about prayer. And prayer was always given the short shrift because it was all about behavior and earning your way into heaven, which is a heresy condemned by just about every Christian denomination, including Catholics. But Catholics have been accused of following this heresy, and many Catholics do. The idea is we have to live a good moral life so that we can get into heaven. We have to live a good moral life, but that's not the focus of living the Christian faith. So let me put it to you this way. Living a good moral life is the result of living our faith, not the motive of living our faith, not the goal of living our faith. Getting to heaven, being good enough to get to heaven is not the goal of living our faith. It is to be in relationship with Christ. And by being in relationship with Christ, we, by default, will live a good moral life. This is so important. And one of the reasons why I want to bring that up is because so often, now I'll tell you, and I just interrupted myself, but one of the things that someone brought up recently are these priests who turn around and telling people not to be in mortal sin. Okay, obviously that's the case. But what happens is they'll teach you can be, you're in mortal sin, but you don't know it. There was one recently that's a person commits cannot go 2 months in their life. He didn't phrase it this way. He basically said, if you've gone 2 months and you don't believe you've committed a mortal sin, something's wrong. And this whole concept, which again brings us back to the moral issue instead of the relationship with Christ issue. But notice that they're all saying that people are in mortal sin. First of all, you cannot accidentally commit a mortal sin. One of my favorite lines that I use all the time to illustrate this is you can't accidentally rob a bank. You just can't do it. The devil doesn't possess a part of your body, and then you can say, well, I didn't mean to rob the bank, but the devil possessed my arm and then grabbed a pistol and forced me to go to the bank. No, that doesn't work. You can't accidentally rob a bank. And so you can't accidentally commit a mortal sin, but notice where the focus is. Your focus is avoiding sin, not committing a mortal sin, being good enough to get to heaven. But if you read what the Gospels say, it's all about relationship. In fact, what is the phrase that Jesus uses in his parables to implicate someone who would not go to heaven? I never knew you. Or, in the case of Matthew 25, you never knew me. Relationship is key. And so you need to understand prayer is essential. If you're parents, you need to be people of prayer. This is one of the things I'm really hot on. If you're getting married, you need to also not only commit to each other as you do in the marriage vows, but commit to each other in prayer. You have to be people of prayer. And a prayer together, and then also separate prayer of your own. So maybe doing a morning prayer together, maybe doing grace together, maybe even spending some time in silence together, but you could be in the same room speaking to God. Prayer is essential, and then you need to teach your children prayer. And I'm not talking rote prayer. Rote prayer is important, right? But many people will say, well, we need to do all these prayers, and they will have rote prayer or rote prayer, R-O-T-E, not I wrote the prayer, so it's rote prayer. No, it's rote prayer is by memory. Or the other side is just reading prayers. No, you need time to be with the Lord. Maybe do good spiritual reading is another thing that will help your prayer, and good spiritual reading. I'm not going to go into bad spiritual reading, but good spiritual reading from people who inspire you and who are committed to the Catholic faith as well. This is what we need. We need to be in relationship with God. And that's what we're looking at in this whole message that we see of the apostles on the way to Emmaus. They are in conversation with Jesus. Jesus is helping them in their confusion. You need that as well. If you are people of faith, which you're assumedly are because you're listening to this podcast, you need to be people of prayer. And you're going to go through difficult times. Lord knows, I know that. And your prayer is going to help you through those difficult times. And that's got to be essential. Now, one of the things I like to bring out, which is so wonderful, is you can go on YouTube or other websites and find Eucharistic Adoration Live that is streaming. I go several places. The latest one I'm going to, which I go back to every so often, is the Kolbe Shrine. Just Kolbe, K-O-B-E, Shrine. They have live streaming from the Kolbe Shrine itself. And there are other places as well. The Comunidad Shalom, or the Shalom Community, I forget whether it's in Portuguese or English, has some, streaming Eucharistic prayer. But keep that in mind, that we need to be people of prayer first. That's where it starts. That will feed your morality. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. One of the most ironic aspects of the understanding of how liturgy works is that the day after Christmas, when we're celebrating the birth of Christ and we have this great celebration of loving one another and presents and everything else, the very next day, the 26th of December, we celebrate the death of the very first martyr for Christianity. The proto-martyr is called, that's St. Stephen. Well, next week, we begin our week, Monday and Tuesday, again, with the account of St. Stephen. He is called the proto-martyr because that means he was the first martyr. That's what proto actually means. So we're going to be looking at St. Stephen next week. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day. Next week, we plan to have a Catholic Audio Media Weekend, a special episode coming up on Saturday, but that's a week from tomorrow, and fascinating subject. We'll talk all about it next week. But in the meantime, have yourself a blessed weekend, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, you know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.